Hey there, and welcome to Echoes of Age. This is the place where we talk real stuff about getting older, in a way that helps you feel stronger, stay sharper, and live better every single day. We're diving into the things no one really talks about when it comes to aging, but should. Let's jump in, Ted.
You know, there's a moment that sneaks up on many of us as we get older. It doesn't happen all at once. No one makes an announcement. But gradually, you start to notice something's changed. You offer advice, and it's brushed aside. You speak up at family gatherings, and somehow your voice doesn't carry the same weight it used to. It's not that your family doesn't love you anymore. That part is usually still there. But respect. That sense that your words matter, your presence matters, that sometimes seems to quietly slip away. And that's a hard thing to sit with, isn't it? Especially when you've spent your whole life raising children, working, building a home, navigating life's storms. Only to feel like now, in these later years, you've become invisible. If that resonates with you, I want you to know, you're not alone. And more importantly, it's not too late to change it. There are real, gentle, practical ways to regain that respect. Not through confrontation, not by demanding it, but by reminding those around you of the value and wisdom you carry. Let's start with something that's easy to overlook. Your own voice. Not your actual speaking voice, but your sense of inner authority. Over time, especially when people stop listening, it's natural to start doubting yourself. You might start keeping quiet more often, thinking, "What's the point?" But the thing is, respect begins with you. If you stop believing that your thoughts matter, others will follow suit. Sometimes, regaining respect starts with speaking a little more clearly, not louder, but more directly. Imagine sitting at the dinner table, and your grandchild says something that sparks a memory. Instead of brushing it off or holding back, you could say, "That reminds me of something I learned the hard way. Can I share it with you?" That small moment of confident sharing sends a message. You have something worth hearing. And the truth is, you do. There's also something incredibly powerful about listening. I know that might sound backwards. After all, aren't we talking about being heard? But think about it this way. When you listen deeply to someone, especially the younger generation, you're showing them what respect looks like. And people tend to mirror what they're shown. The more they feel truly heard by you, the more likely they are to slow down and pay attention when it's your turn to speak. Now, you might be thinking, "But I've been listening for years, and it hasn't helped." That's fair. But here's the difference. Listening with presence and curiosity rather than just patience. Ask questions. Show interest in things you might not fully understand, whether that's your grandson's new job or your daughter's approach to parenting. Even if it all sounds foreign to you, engaging with it creates connection. And connection naturally leads to respect. There's a story I heard not long ago about a retired teacher named Margaret. She was 72, and she told me her biggest heartbreak was feeling like her family didn't really ask her opinion anymore. She'd spent decades mentoring students, helping them grow. But now, even her own kids didn't come to her for advice. One day, her granddaughter asked for help with a school project on family history. Margaret saw an opportunity. Instead of just giving facts, she told stories. She wove in life lessons, little bits of humor, and reflections that made her granddaughter light up. That single moment reignited something. Suddenly, the family started turning to her again, not just for memories, but for guidance. Sometimes, regaining respect is about stepping into the role you already have, but maybe haven't claimed in a while. You're the keeper of wisdom, of family tradition, of perspective. And even when it feels like no one's paying attention, you can gently reintroduce yourself as that guiding voice. Another quiet but powerful way to build back respect is to show that you're still growing. I know that might sound unusual. After all, isn't growing something we expect from younger people? But actually, when your family sees that you're still learning, still evolving, still adapting, it changes their perception of you entirely. Maybe it's trying a new hobby, or joining a local group, or learning something online. When you bring something new to the table, even something small, you're saying, "I'm not done yet." And that's a powerful message. It says you're not just sitting back and letting life happen. You're still engaged, still curious, still alive with purpose. That's magnetic. That's inspiring. And it earns respect in ways words alone can't. We'll continue talking about this in just a moment, but I want to pause here and remind you, this process isn't about changing who you are. It's about rediscovering your strength and letting it shine in ways your family might have forgotten to see. Not because they don't care, but because life gets noisy, fast-paced, and sometimes people forget to slow down and listen. But when you speak with presence, when you listen with heart, when you show up with new energy, people notice. They remember. And they start treating you the way you deserve to be treated. In the next part, we'll explore how boundaries, yes, even at this stage of life, can restore balance and respect in family dynamics, and why saying no more often might actually help you be heard more clearly. So let's talk about something that might feel a little uncomfortable at first. Boundaries. You might be wondering, at my age, do I really need to think about boundaries? And the answer is yes. Maybe now more than ever. See, boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about creating space for mutual respect. And when your family sees that you respect yourself enough to say no, to pause, or to ask for what you need, it often reminds them to do the same. It's easy to slip into roles, especially in families. Maybe you've always been the one who fixes everything, the one who says yes, the one who drops what you're doing to help, because that's what love looks like, right? But here's the thing, when you constantly give without pause, some people, without meaning to, start to take it for granted. Not out of malice, but out of habit. And that's when the respect starts to erode. One woman I spoke to, her name was Irene, told me something that stuck with me. She said, "My family loves me, but I realized they didn't always appreciate me." She used to babysit her grandchildren every single weekend. At first, it was joyful, but eventually, it became expected. She stopped getting a thank you. They started assuming her schedule was always open. And when she once said she had plans and couldn't help that Saturday, her daughter got upset. That moment shook her. But here's what Irene did. She didn't argue or apologize. She gently explained that while she loved being with the grandkids, she also needed time for herself. She started choosing a couple of weekends a month just for her. At first, it surprised her family, but over time they adjusted. And more than that, they respected her more. That's the thing about boundaries. They're not walls. They're invitations. They invite others to treat you as a full person, not just a support system. And when you teach people how to treat you, with care, with thoughtfulness, they often rise to the occasion. Now, boundaries also mean speaking up when something doesn't feel right. Maybe it's the way someone talks to you. Maybe it's being interrupted constantly, or not being included in family plans. It might be tempting to stay silent and avoid rocking the boat. But silence, over time, starts to feel like acceptance. So, if your son talks over you during dinner, or your daughter makes decisions without asking your opinion, even if it's something small, there's power in calmly saying, "I'd like to share my thoughts too," or, "It's important to me to be included in conversations like this." Not to shame them, not to scold, but to remind them that your voice still matters. And let's talk about tone for a second. When we're hurt or frustrated, it's natural to let that leak into our voice. But when you speak with calm confidence, when your words are steady instead of sharp, people listen differently. It creates space for reflection instead of defense. Another part of boundaries that often goes overlooked is the space we allow for our own joy. I've met many seniors who spend so much energy trying to maintain family relationships that they forget to nourish themselves. But here's something important to remember. Your life doesn't have to shrink as the years go on. In fact, this stage of life can be filled with some of the richest, most fulfilling moments if you allow yourself that space. Think about something that brings you joy, something just for you. Maybe it's painting, or walking by the lake, or joining a local club, or even volunteering. When your family sees that you have a full, joyful life that isn't entirely centered around them, it shifts the dynamic. They begin to see you not just as mom or grandma or dad, but as a person who's still growing, still choosing joy, still full of life. And this is important. They begin to miss you. They begin to reach out. Not out of obligation, but because they feel the energy you're radiating. That sense of self-respect, of purpose. It draws people in. There's also something to be said about self-presentation. Now, I'm not talking about dressing up for others or trying to impress anyone, but there's a quiet dignity in how we show up for ourselves. When you put a little care into your day, brushing your hair with intention, wearing a color you love, standing tall even when your back aches, it sends a message: I still matter. And that message doesn't go unnoticed. I once knew a man named Walter, 84 years old, lived alone, and every Sunday he wore a crisp shirt and a pair of polished shoes to his family lunch. His grandson once asked, "Grandpa, why do you always dress up for us?" And he said, "Because seeing you is special to me. And I want you to know I take it seriously." That small habit slowly changed how his family saw him. They started dressing up too. They started showing up on time. They leaned in a little more when he spoke. What we do, how we carry ourselves, it teaches others how to treat us. So as we continue on this journey of regaining respect, I want you to sit with this idea, that boundaries aren't barriers, they're bridges. Bridges to better relationships, clearer communication, and deeper connection. And every time you set one, gently but firmly, you're building something stronger. In the next part of our conversation, we'll look at how storytelling, yes, your personal stories, can become one of the most powerful tools you have to reconnect with your family and remind them of who you are and all that you've lived through. Sometimes, the path to being heard again starts with sharing what shaped you. And I promise, you have more to share than you might think. Now, if you've ever felt like your words are just drifting in the air during family conversations, as if no one's really hearing you, it might be time to try something a little different. Not louder, not harsher, just deeper. And that's where your stories come in. See, one of the most overlooked ways to regain respect, especially from younger generations, is to share your own life, not as a lecture, but as a story. Not in a way that says, "I know better," but in a way that says, "I've been through something and here's what I learned." Because stories do something facts can't. They draw people in. They invite curiosity. They make others pause. When you were growing up, how did you learn about the world? I'll bet a lot of it came through the stories of your parents, your grandparents, those little moments when someone opened up and told you what life was really like. That same power lives in you now. I met a gentleman once, Carlos, who felt like his teenage grandson had started tuning him out completely. Whenever they talked, it was just one-word answers. Carlos tried to give advice about school, about life, about responsibility, but it all bounced off. So one day, instead of advice, Carlos told him about the first time he got fired. He didn't sugarcoat it. He told him how embarrassed he felt, how angry he was at himself, how he learned to face it. And something shifted. The grandson didn't just nod. He asked questions. He wanted to know more. Because in that moment, Carlos wasn't preaching. He was connecting. And you have stories like that, too. More than you probably realize. The first time you stood up for yourself. The time you made a mistake that taught you something valuable. The moment when your heart broke, or when it soared. These stories aren't just about the past. They are lessons wrapped in memory. They're proof that you've lived through storms, and that your wisdom comes from experience, not just age. But here's the secret. How you tell the story matters. Instead of saying, "Back in my day, we did things the right way," try saying, "Something happened to me once that really stuck with me." And then let them into that moment. Let them picture it, feel it, and trust them enough to find the lesson for themselves. And don't just share the big events. Sometimes the smallest stories are the most powerful, like the time you stayed silent when you should have spoken up, or how you handled disappointment. Those are the stories that show your vulnerability, and it's vulnerability that draws people close. Now, I want to say something important here. Your family may not respond right away. Some of them might smile and say, "That's interesting," and move on. But don't let that discourage you. Seeds take time to grow. And sometimes, what you share today might bloom in them weeks, months, or even years from now. Your words matter, even if they don't echo back instantly. And while we're talking about sharing, it's just as important to ask. Ask your children what their biggest challenge is right now. Ask your grandchildren what makes them feel proud. When you take an interest in their world, not just to correct it, but to understand it, you build something rare. You show them that respect is a two-way street. People open up to those who make them feel safe. So when you share a story, and then invite one in return, you start weaving a thread between generations. That's how respect grows, through shared humanity. And I'll tell you something else. When your family starts to remember who you are, not just the role you've played, but the life you've lived, they start seeing you differently. They remember that you're not just someone who makes dinner or gives birthday cards or reminds them to take a jacket. You're someone who has lived, someone who has something to say, someone worth listening to. It doesn't mean every story will land perfectly. Sometimes they'll get distracted, or won't ask follow-up questions. That's okay. What matters is that you're showing up with your full self. You're saying, "Here I am, in all my experience, and I still have something to offer." That message, spoken softly or boldly, rings louder than you think. You don't need permission to speak your truth. You've earned your place at the table. And every time you claim it, gently and authentically, you make it easier for them to meet you there with fresh eyes. In the final part of our conversation, we're going to explore something that might surprise you. How letting go of trying to change others can actually bring you the respect you've been hoping for. Because sometimes, the most powerful shift doesn't happen when we push. It happens when we pull back, trust, and stand steady in who we are. So now we come to something that might feel a bit counterintuitive, especially when you care so deeply. Letting go of the need to change others. And I know, when someone you love isn't listening, or seems to have stopped seeing you the way they used to, it's easy to want to fix it, to press harder, to explain one more time, just a little clearer, to try to say the right thing so they'll finally understand. But here's the truth no one tells us enough. You can't force respect. You can invite it. You can earn it. But you can't demand it into existence. And the more we chase after someone's approval, the more it can feel like we're handing our worth over to them, hoping they'll give it back. That's not your role. You've already lived through enough to know who you are. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is to stop chasing and start standing. Not standing with anger or distance, but with quiet confidence. With a sense of peace that says, "I know what I bring to this family. I know what I've overcome. And even if you don't see it yet, I won't forget it." You see, When you stop trying to get others to change, something changes in you. Your energy shifts. You start to carry yourself differently. You speak with less frustration and more clarity. You make space for respect to return, not because you demanded it, but because you created the conditions where it could grow naturally. And people feel that. Your children, your grandchildren, they notice when something is different. When you stop arguing and start listening more. When you stop correcting and start reflecting more. When you pull back, not in silence, but in strength. It creates room for their curiosity to return, for their hearts to soften, for their own respect to grow not out of guilt or obligation, but out of genuine recognition. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying the weight of other people's behavior on your back. You still show up. You still love them. But you stop tying your self-worth to how they treat you